The rays of the morning sun streamed through the stained glass windows of the old Methodist church in Dodge City, casting different shades of purple and blue on the wooden pews. Anishka Quaid stood in front of the mirror in the small bridal room, smoothing out imaginary wrinkles in her ivory dress. Her dark skin contrasted with the whiteness of her dress, and her tight braids, adorned with tiny pearls, were gathered into an elaborate hairstyle. "You look stunning," Zara Kate adjusted her friend's train. "Lamont will faint when he sees you." Anishka smiled, but a shadow of concern flashed in her eyes. "I hope there won't be any fainting, especially on his mother's part." Zara snorted as she took a bottle of perfume out of her purse. "Vivica? That woman looks like she's never fainted in her life. If anything, she's capable of making others faint with a single glance." "She's just protecting her son," Anishka shrugged, but her voice sounded uncertain. "I would do the same." "Protecting him? She keeps him in a cage. You saw how she reacted to your background. From a foster family? Who are your real parents?" Zara tried to imitate Vivica's haughty tone. Anisha sighed deeply, adjusting the thin straps of her dress. "Everything will be fine today. I'm marrying the man I love. Nothing else matters." At the other end of the church, Lamont Rivera nervously adjusted his bow tie as he stood in front of a small mirror in the groom's room. His tall figure was clad in a perfectly tailored dark chocolate-colored tuxedo. He ran his hand through his closely cropped hair and took a deep breath. "Stop fidgeting. You're a lawyer, not a teenager on a first date," Tayo Okafor chuckled, adjusting his own tie. "In court, I defend others, not myself," Lamont retorted. "And my mother isn't there watching my every move." The door opened, and Vivica Rivera entered the room. Despite being 52 years old, she looked elegant in a dark blue suit that accentuated her slim figure. The only signs of age were the fine lines around her eyes and the silver strands in her carefully styled hair. "Son, are you ready?" She approached Lamont and scrutinized his outfit. "Let me fix that." Lamont allowed his mother to adjust his bow tie, but his eyes betrayed his irritation. "Mom, I can do it myself. I'm not a child." "You'll always be my little boy." Vivica smiled affectionately, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "I just want you to be happy." "I'm happy with Anisha," Lamont said firmly. "I hope you'll finally accept that." Vivica took a step back, her face frozen in a polite smile. "Of course, dear. I'm just worried. You've only known each other for a year, and we know so little about her past." "Enough," Lamont cut her off sharply. "Today is my day, and I don't want to ruin it." Tayo cleared his throat, breaking the tense silence. "I think it's time we take our places. Lamont, are you ready to become a married man?" Lamont squared his shoulders and smiled. "More than ready." The ceremony passed in a blur. Lamont stood at the altar, his heart pounding as the wedding march began to play. Anishka walked down the aisle alone. She had no father to lead her to the altar. But she looked confident and radiant, clutching a bouquet of white and purple flowers in her hands. When their eyes met, Lamont felt all his doubts melt away. They exchanged vows, and his voice did not waver as he promised to love and honor her for the rest of his life. When the priest declared them husband and wife, the hall erupted in applause. Only Vivica Rivera sat with a stony expression on her face, clapping mechanically. Her gaze was fixed on Anishka, and it read something like contempt. After the ceremony, the guests moved to the church's banquet hall, where tables were set for a festive dinner. Lamont and Anishka sat at the head table, accepting congratulations and smiling at the guests. "How does it feel, Mrs. Rivera?" Lamont whispered, leaning toward his wife's ear. "Unfamiliar," Anishka admitted. "But I like it." Vivica approached their table, holding a glass of champagne in her hands. "Congratulations to both of you," she said, but her gaze was fixed only on her son. "Lamont, your father would be so proud." "Thank you, Mom." Lamont took Anisha's hand. "I'm sure he would have approved of my choice." "Yes." Vivica finally looked at Anisha. I'd like to talk to you alone, dear. There's a family tradition I'd like to tell you about. Anisha looked surprised, but nodded. Of course, Mrs. Rivera. Vivica, please. We're family now. Vivica's smile didn't reach her eyes. Tayo watched this exchange from his seat at the next table. Something about Lamont's mother's behavior made him wary. Years of working as a detective had taught him to recognize insincerity, and now his instincts were screaming danger. You look worried, Zara remarked, sitting down next to him. Can't you relax even at your friend's wedding? Tayo shook his head. Just observing. An old habit. What exactly? Zara followed his gaze. Ah, the monster mom. Yeah, she's something else. I heard she dug up all of Anisha's past, trying to find something compromising. Tayo raised his eyebrows in surprise. Seriously? Why? She doesn't like that Anishka is taking her precious son. Zara sipped her champagne. Classic mother-in-law jealousy, although in this case she went too far. She even hired a private investigator, can you believe it? Tio frowned. How do you know? Zara shrugged. Anishka told me. She accidentally saw a bill from a detective agency at Lamont's house. Vivica left it in plain sight, as if on purpose. At the other end of the hall, a photographer was gathering guests for group photos. Lamont was looking for Anishka, but she had disappeared with his mother. Have you seen Anisha? He asked, approaching Tayo and Zara. We have to take a picture. She left with your mother, Zara replied. Something about a family tradition? Lamont frowned. What tradition? We don't have anything like that. Tayo felt a chill run down his spine. Where could they have gone? Maybe the bride's room? Lamont suggested. Anishka left her purse there. The three of them headed for a small room in the side wing of the church. The door was ajar, and there was no sound coming from inside. Lamont knocked. Anishka? Mom? Are you there? Silence. Tayo felt a wave of anxiety wash over him. Let's check it out. Lamont pushed the door open, revealing an empty room. Cosmetics were scattered on the floor, and the mirror was broken. What the hell? Lamont muttered as he stepped inside. And then they saw her. Anisha was lying behind the sofa, partially hidden by a long curtain. Her white dress was stained red, and her eyes were frozen, staring into nothingness. Next to her lay a heavy crystal vase, stained with blood. Zara screamed. Lamont lunged forward, but Tayo held him back. Don't touch anything, he commanded, already reaching for his phone. This is a crime scene. What are you talking about? Lamont broke free from his grip. My wife. My wife. He fell to his knees next to Anishka's body, his hands trembling above her face, not daring to touch her. Tayo quickly scanned the room. There were no signs of forced entry. The door hadn't been broken down. Whoever did this, Anisha let them in willingly. Or it was someone she wasn't afraid of. Where's my mother? Lamont's voice was full of horror and suspicion. Tayo looked around. Vivica was nowhere to be seen. I'm calling the police, he said, dialing the number. No one is leaving the church until they arrive. Just as he finished the call, Vivica appeared in the doorway. Her face contorted with horror at the sight of Anishka's body. My God! What happened? She exclaimed, pressing her hand to her mouth. I looked everywhere for her. We agreed to meet here, but she didn't come, so I went to look for her. Lamont raised his head, his face wet with tears. Where were you, Mom? His voice was low and dangerous. I waited for her at the chapel, but she didn't come. Vivica stepped into the room, but Tayo blocked her way. Don't go in, Mrs. Rivera. This is a crime scene. There was a noise in the hallway. One of the guests had apparently heard Zara's scream. What's going on? A voice called out. Tayo quickly closed the door. Zara, he said to Anishka's friend, who was frozen in shock. Go outside and don't let anyone in here. Tell them the bride isn't feeling well and we've called a doctor. Zara nodded, her face white with shock, but she obediently left. Only Tayo, Lamont, and Viveka remained in the room, and Anishka's body, whose blood was slowly soaking into the snow-white carpet. "Someone killed my wife," Lamont said, his voice breaking on the last word. "On our wedding day." "We'll find the person who did this," Tayo said firmly, his eyes fixed on Viveka. "I promise." Viveka looked at Anisha's body with a strange mixture of horror and something else that Tayo couldn't quite identify, but his detective instincts screamed that something was wrong here. 15 minutes later, the police arrived. The guests were isolated in the banquet hall, and the crime scene was cordoned off. The medical examiner leaned over Anishka's body, carefully examining the wound on her head. "A strong blow with a blunt object," he concluded. "Presumably with this vase, death was instantaneous." Lamont sat in the corner, his gaze vacant, his shoulders slumped. Next to him sat Tayo, who, despite his friendship with Lamont, was already thinking like a detective. "I'll need to ask you a few questions," he said quietly. "But not now." Lamont nodded without looking up. "She was so happy today," he whispered. "Who could have hated her?" Tayo didn't answer, but his gaze involuntarily drifted to Viveka, who was now being questioned by one of the officers. Something told him that the answer might be closer than Lamont thought. The evening that was supposed to be the beginning of a new happy life had turned into a nightmare. And somewhere among the guests in their white festive attire, the killer was hiding. Tayo Okafor sat at his desk at the Dodge City Police Station, sorting through photos from the crime scene. 2 days had passed since Anisha's murder, but the memory of Lamont's broken face still haunted him. As a friend, he felt helpless. As a detective, he was determined to find the killer. "What do we have?" asked Lieutenant Jamila Pierce, leaning on the edge of his desk. "Not much," Tayo admitted, laying out the photos in chronological order. Anisha Quaid, 25 years old, killed on her wedding day. Struck on the back of the head with a crystal vase. Death was instantaneous. No fingerprints on the vase. The killer was probably wearing gloves. Motive? Working on it. Anisha was a computer security specialist. According to her friend Zara Kate, she may have had some run-ins with the law in the past, but nothing specific. I've requested her full file. What about the groom's family? Jamila took one of the photos showing Viveka Rivera giving testimony. Lamont Rivera, the fiancé, is a human rights lawyer. His mother, Viveka Rivera, owns a chain of funeral homes in the county. His father died when Lamont was a teenager. "The funeral business," Jamila snorted. "The irony of fate." Tayo didn't answer, instead pulling out his notebook with his notes. "I interviewed all the guests. No one saw anything suspicious. Anisha talked to Viveka after the ceremony. Then they went somewhere together. According to Viveka, they agreed to meet in the bride's room, but when she got there, Anisha was gone." "And you don't believe her?" Tayo looked up. "I didn't say that." "You don't have to. I know that look." Jamila straightened up. "Check her alibi, and talk to the bride's friend again. Maybe she knows more than she's saying." After the lieutenant left, Tayo leaned back in his chair, remembering how he met Lamont 3 years ago. It was a high-profile case of abuse of authority by an officer who beat a teenager during an arrest. Tayo was a witness, and Lamont was the boy's family's lawyer. After the trial, they got talking and unexpectedly hit it off. Lamont was not like the other lawyers Tayo had dealt with. He did not seek to discredit the police, but only sought justice. When Tayo admitted that his colleagues' actions were excessive, Lamont appreciated his honesty. That's how their friendship began. A year ago, Anisha appeared. Tayo remembered seeing her for the first time at Lamont's barbecue. She was quiet, but her eyes revealed a sharp mind. Lamont introduced her as a cybersecurity specialist, and Tayo noticed her tense slightly at the words. "You're a cop, right?" she asked later, when they were alone at the drinks table. "Detective," Tayo clarified. "Is that a problem?" "Depends on how deep you dig." He laughed then, taking it as a joke. But now those words took on new meaning. A phone call snapped him out of his memories. "Detective Okafor," he answered. "Tayo, it's Zara. We need to talk about Anisha's past." Tayo sat up straight in his chair. "I'm listening." "Not over the phone. Meet me at the Blue Moon in an hour." Half an hour later, Tayo entered the Blue Moon bar, where Zara worked evenings. During the day, the place was almost empty, with only a couple of regulars dozing in the corner. Zara sat at a table in the back, nervously twirling a glass of water in her hands. "Thanks for coming," she said, when Tayo sat down across from her. "What did you want to talk about?" Zara looked around to make sure no one was listening, then lowered her voice. "Anishka wasn't your typical security specialist. In the past, we were hackers, not just pranksters hacking school websites. We did serious stuff." Tayo kept his expression impassive. "How serious?" "Serious enough to attract the attention of the FBI, but they never caught us." "We were good," she said, a note of pride sounding in her voice, which she quickly suppressed. 3 years ago, Anisha decided to quit. She said she wanted a normal life. And what happened? One last job. She never gave any details, but I know she hacked into some big corporation. Something to do with pharmaceuticals. She found evidence that they had falsified test results, and she leaked the information. Tayo wrote this down in his notebook. "Do you know the name of the company?" "Alpha Farm, I think. It was a high-profile case. They lost millions after the scandal." Tayo nodded. He vaguely remembered the case. A few years ago, the pharmaceutical company's stock had plummeted after data was leaked about the falsification of clinical trial results for a new drug. "Why did you decide to tell me this now?" Zara took a sip of water. "Because Anisha was afraid. In the last week before the wedding, she became paranoid. She said she felt like she was being followed. I thought it was just pre-wedding stress, but..." Her voice trembled. "What if I was wrong? What if someone was really after her because of that old case?" After talking to Zara, Tayo headed to Lamont's house. His friend hadn't answered his calls since the murder, and Tayo was worried about him. Vivica opened the door. Despite the tragedy, she looked impeccable. Not a single strand of hair out of place, not a single wrinkle on her strict black dress. "Detective Okafor," her voice was cold. "Lamont is resting. I need to talk to him, Mrs. Rivera." "I already told you everything I know during the interrogation." "I'm not here for questioning." Tayo tried to soften his tone. "I'm your son's friend, and I'm worried about him." Vivica hesitated, then reluctantly stepped aside, letting him in. 5 minutes. He needs his rest. Lamont sat in the living room, staring into space. An untouched cup of tea sat on the coffee table. He looked haggard, dark circles under his eyes. "Hey!" Tayo called softly. Lamont slowly looked up. "Oh, it's you. How are you? How do you think?" Lamont smiled bitterly. "My wife was killed on our wedding day. I was supposed to be planning our honeymoon, but instead I'm organizing her funeral." Tayo sat down next to him. "I'm sorry. I really am." They were silent for a moment. The sound of the dishwasher running could be heard from the kitchen. "Has your mother been here since that day?" Tayo asked. "Yes. She insisted on staying with me. She says I can't be alone." "I understand," Tayo said cautiously. "But maybe you need some personal space?" I tried to explain that to her. Lamont shook his head. "It's useless. She's always been like that. Controlling. When my father died, she literally wouldn't let me out of her sight. I ran away to college to get some breathing room." Tayo remembered that he wanted to ask about Lamont's father. "I never heard how your father died." "An accident at a construction site. I was a teenager at the time." Lamont ran his hand over his face. "After that, my mother changed. She became overprotective. She controlled my every move. I understand her fear, but sometimes it was unbearable." Vivica appeared in the doorway with a tray holding a fresh cup of tea and a plate of sandwiches. "You need to eat, son," she said, ignoring Tayo. You've hardly eaten anything since that day." "I'm not hungry, Mom," Lamont replied wearily. "But you need to keep your strength up. What would Anisha think if she saw you like this?" Lamont flinched, and Tayo noticed Vivica wince slightly, as if she couldn't believe she had said those words. "I'll leave you two alone," Tayo said, getting up. "Call me if you need anything." As he was leaving, he heard Vivica say quietly to her son, "That detective asks too many questions. I don't think he should come here." Tayo frowned. What was Vivica afraid he might find out? Back at the station, Tayo began digging into the history of Alpha Farm. The scandal involving the falsification of clinical trial results had indeed caused the company's stock to plummet 3 years ago. Many investors lost huge sums of money. He checked the list of major shareholders and suddenly froze. Among the largest investors was the name V. Rivera. "Vivica," he muttered. "Damn it." Tayo quickly dialed the number for the police financial department. "I need Vivica Rivera's complete financial history for the last 5 years. I'm particularly interested in her investments in Alpha Farm." An hour later, the report was on his desk. Vivica was indeed a major investor in Alpha Farm and had lost nearly $2 million when the company collapsed. This explained why her funeral business had suddenly shrunk from 6 locations to 2 within a year after the scandal. She had nearly gone bankrupt. But did she know about Anishka's connection to the case? And if so, how could she have found out? Tayo took out his phone and called Zara. "Did Anishka have any social media accounts or blogs related to her hacking activities?" "There was one," Zara replied after a pause. "She used the pseudonym Black Cat. But that was a long time ago. She must have deleted everything. Can you send me the link?" A few minutes later, Tayo was browsing through the old blog. Most of the posts were coded or written in a language only understood by those in the know. But one post caught his attention, a short note about pharmaceutical liars getting what they deserve. "Damn, Anishka," he muttered. "You left a trail." By evening, Tayo was back at Lamont's house. This time, the owner himself opened the door. "You look better," Tayo remarked, although that was an exaggeration. "Mom went to her room for a couple of hours to pick up some documents." Lamont let him in. "I finally have time to think." They went into the living room, where Lamont turned on the TV at minimum volume. "So no one can eavesdrop," he explained, noticing his friend's surprise. "I'm not paranoid. It's just, I think you were right. I need some personal space. I asked my mom to go back to her house." "How did she react?" "What do you think?" Lamont smiled bitterly. "First she refused, then she cried, then she accused me of being ungrateful. Classic manipulation." Tayo chose his words carefully. "Lamont, I need to ask you some difficult questions. Not as a friend, but as a detective investigating a case." Lamont tensed, but nodded. "Did your mother ever mention the company Alpha Farm?" "No. Why?" "She was a major investor and lost almost her entire fortune because of a scandal 3 years ago. A scandal that Anishka may have been involved in." Lamont stared at him. "What are you talking about?" Tayo told him about his conversation with Zara and his findings. With each word, Lamont's face grew darker. "You think my mother killed Anisha for money?" His voice trembled with anger and disbelief. "I'm not jumping to conclusions. I'm gathering facts. This is crazy. Yes, my mother is controlling and manipulative, but she's not a murderer. Then help me rule her out as a suspect." Tayo leaned forward. "Was she wearing gloves at the wedding?" Lamont frowned, trying to remember. "No. Wait. Yes, she was. White gloves up to her elbows. Part of her outfit." "Where is it now?" "The outfit? It should be in the guest room. She brought a few things when she decided to stay with me." Tayo stood up. "I need to take a look." Lamont hesitated for only a second, then nodded. "Let's go." The guest room was immaculately tidy. A small travel bag lay on the bed, and several dresses hung in the closet. "The wedding outfit should be here," Lamont said, opening the closet wider. "She wore this dress to the church." Tio carefully examined the dark blue dress, but the gloves were nowhere to be seen. "Maybe they're in the bag," he suggested. Lamont opened the bag and began rummaging through its contents. "Strange. They're not here." Tio walked around the room, looking under the bed and in the laundry basket. "What's this?" He noticed something shiny stuck between the bedside table and the wall. Bending down, he picked up a small metal object with his fingers. "It's a key," Lamont said, looking over his shoulder. "An unusual shape." The key was thin and long, with an intricate head and a series of teeth at the end. "It's not from this house." Lamont shook his head. "Never seen it before." Tio turned the key in his hands. "It looks like a key to a data storage facility. Special safes for storing hard drives or flash drives. They're often used in IT companies." Lamont looked at the key with renewed interest. "Anishka, she might have had one. Have you ever seen her with it?" "No, but she was always very secretive about her work. She said the less I knew, the better for me." Tio carefully placed the key in an evidence bag. "This could be important. Maybe Anisha kept something valuable, or dangerous, in a storage facility like that." "And my mother could have found this key?" Lamont looked shaken. "I'm not jumping to conclusions," Tio repeated, "but we have to find that safe deposit box." They heard the front door open and immediately glanced at each other. Vivica was back. "Keep talking," Tio said quickly, hiding the bag with the key in his pocket. "I'll find a way to check this key." "Lamont?" Vivica's voice came from the hallway. "Do you have guests?" "It's Tio, Mom," Lamont replied, coming out of the guest room. "We're just talking." Tio followed him, feeling Vivica's piercing gaze on him. Her eyes showed suspicion, mixed with something like fear. The key in his pocket felt unexpectedly heavy. It could lead to the solution of Anishka's murder, or be the beginning of a story even darker than Tio could imagine. Tio twirled the small metal key he had found in Vivica's room. The polished steel glinted dully under the lamp in his office. Lieutenant Jamila Pierce stood nearby, her arms crossed over her chest. "And you're sure this is the key to the data vault?" she asked, squinting. "Almost certain. These are used by companies involved in cybersecurity. The shape is distinctive." Tio placed the key on the table. "I need to find out what it's for." "How do you plan to do that?" Tio rubbed his nose. Anishka was a security specialist. People like that always have a backup plan. She must have stored important data somewhere. Maybe her friend Zara knows more. Jamila nodded. "Go ahead, but be careful. If your suspicions about Lamont's mother are correct, we're dealing with a cold-blooded killer." "She lost almost everything because of the Alpha Farm scandal," Tio said thoughtfully. "Millions of dollars and her reputation as a major investor. All she has left is a funeral business that's barely staying afloat. Motivation enough for murder? For some people, money means more than other people's lives," Tio said, putting the key in his pocket. "I'll call Zara." An hour later, Tio met Zara in an empty office building on the outskirts of Dodge City. The complex had been recently built, but due to the economic downturn, most of the premises were vacant. Zara was waiting for him at the service entrance. "You were right," she said, leading him inside. "Anishka did rent a data storage facility here. She showed it to me once, said it was just in case. Do you know what's in there? Backups, evidence. Everything she might need if her past came back to haunt her." Zara stopped in front of a metal door in the basement. "Here." Tio took out a key. "Let's see if it fits." The key fit perfectly into the keyhole and turned with a quiet click. Inside the storage room was a small server and several hard drives. "Do you know how to work with this?" Tio asked. "I'm not as good as Anishka, but I can manage," Zara said, already connecting one of the drives to her laptop. "Everything here is encrypted, but I know her usual passwords." While Zara worked, Tio examined the storage unit. It was clear that Anishka had been preparing for the day when she would have to prove her innocence, or the guilt of others. "I did it," Zara finally said. "Look." A folder opened on the screen with files dated 3 years ago. Here it is. Zara opened one of the documents. This is about the Alpha Farm scandal. Anishka gathered all the evidence that they had falsified the test results for a new drug, a diabetes medication that actually caused serious side effects. Why didn't she go to the police with this? Because she obtained the information illegally, Zara shook her head. Instead, she anonymously leaked the data online. A scandal erupted, stocks plummeted, and investors lost millions. Including Viveka Rivera, Tayo remarked grimly. Yes, but how could Viveka have known that it was Anishka who did it? Zara leafed through a few more files. Wait, oh no. What is it? The blog. Anisha kept a private blog under a pseudonym, where she sometimes bragged about her achievements. Most of it is encrypted, but... Zara opened a screenshot of a post. Here, she wrote that she restored justice for diabetes patients, and she added an image, a small Alpha Farm logo in flames, a classic hacker mistake, bragging. And if Viveka somehow found this blog, she could connect the dots. Zara closed the file, especially if she hired a private investigator to check Anisha's past before the wedding. Tayo took out his phone and quickly dialed a number. Jamila? I need a search warrant for Viveka Rivera's house, and have someone check if she hired a private investigator in the last few months. Once the formalities were over, Tayo drove to Lamont's house. He had to tell his friend the truth, no matter how painful it was. Lamont looked exhausted, but more composed than when they last met. Come in, he said, letting Tayo inside. Mom went home like I asked. I needed some space. They sat down in the living room, and Tayo began cautiously. Lamont, I found what that key was for, and we got access to Anishka's data. He told him everything they had discovered with Zara. With each word, Lamont's face grew paler. My mother lost her fortune because of Anisha. His voice was barely audible. And you think she found out about it and... We have reason to believe so, Tayo said softly. I got a search warrant for her house. We're looking for evidence. Lamont covered his face with his hands. I can't believe it. My own mother. I'm sorry. Tayo put his hand on his friend's shoulder. I'm really sorry. Tayo's phone rang. It was Jamila. We found a bill from a detective agency in her office, she reported. It's dated 2 months ago. And something else interesting. Printouts from the Black Cat blog with Viveka's notes. She knew Tayo. She knew for sure that Anisha was behind the collapse of Alpha Farm. What about the gloves? Tayo asked. We didn't find them. But they found burnt fabric remnants in a trash can in the backyard. The lab is testing it, but it looks like the silk used to make those gloves. Detain her, Tayo said. I'll be there soon. He ended the call and turned to Lamont. I have to go. Do you want to come with me? Lamont slowly raised his head. Yes, I need to hear it from her myself. On the way to Viveka's house, Tayo received another call. She's escaped, Jamila reported. A neighbor saw her leaving with a suitcase about an hour ago. Damn. Put out an APB, checked the airports, bus stations. She couldn't have gone far. Tayo made a sharp turn on the road. What's wrong? Lamont asked. Your mother ran away. Any idea where she might have gone? Lamont thought for a moment. Maybe. She has a small summer house on Lake Meredith. We used to go there when I was a kid. She always said it was her refuge. Do you know the address? No, but I can show you the way. They left the city and headed north. An hour passed in tense silence. Lamont stared out the window, lost in thought. Why? He finally said. Why did she do it? Is money more important to her than my happiness? Tio didn't know how to respond. Some people lose themselves when it comes to big losses. Money changes people. But to kill an innocent person? My wife? To her, Aniska wasn't innocent. She was the one who ruined her life. They turned onto a dirt road leading to a small lake. A wooden cabin was visible in the distance. Over there, Lamont pointed. And her car is there. Tayo parked at a safe distance and took out his gun. "Stay in the car," he said. "No," Lamont said firmly. "She's my mother. I have to talk to her. It could be dangerous. She won't hurt me. Never." Tayo hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, but I'm going first, and if I tell you to back off, you back off. No questions asked." They approached the cottage. A faint light came from inside. Vivica was home. Tayo knocked on the door. "Mrs. Rivera, this is Detective Okafor. We need to talk." Silence. Then footsteps sounded, and the door slowly opened. Vivica stood in the doorway, looking surprisingly calm. "I knew you would find me," she said, her gaze shifting from Tayo to her son. "Lamont, you shouldn't have come." "Why, Mom?" Lamont's voice trembled. "Why did you do this?" Vivica looked at him with painful tenderness. "Come in," she said. "I'll explain everything." They entered the cottage. Inside, it was clean and cozy, a small living room with a fireplace, a kitchenette, several doors leading to other rooms. "Mrs. Rivera," Tayo began, "we know about your investment in Alpha Farm, and we know what you found out about Anisha's role in the company's collapse." Vivica sat down in a chair, folding her hands in her lap. "You're a smart man, Detective. Yes, I lost almost everything because of this scandal. Money that was supposed to secure my son's future. Money that I had saved for years, working day and night after my husband's death." "And that's why you killed Anisha?" Lamont asked, standing by the window. "Because of the money?" "Not just because of the money, son." Vivica shook her head. "Because of betrayal. That girl ruined our lives, and then she had the nerve to walk into our family as if nothing had happened." "She didn't know you were an investor," Lamont objected. "She didn't mean to hurt you personally. She knew her actions would affect thousands of people, but she didn't care." Vivica straightened up. "Do you know what I lost besides money? My reputation? Respect? I was a respected businesswoman, and now I'm the owner of a dying funeral home on the outskirts of town." "Is that why you hired a private investigator?" Tayo asked. "To find out about Anisha's past?" "Yes. At first it was just a precaution. I wanted to make sure my son's girlfriend was worthy of him. But the detective found her blog, and when I saw that post..." Vivica clenched her fists. "I recognized the logo. I've seen that damn logo in my nightmares for years. The same company that took everything from me." "And you decided to kill her," Tayo said quietly. "Not right away." Vivica looked at her son. "At first, I just wanted to ruin the wedding, to tell you the truth about her. But then I realized you wouldn't believe me. You were so blindly in love." "You could have talked to me." Lamont's voice trembled. "We could have discussed everything." "And what would you have done?" Vivica asked bitterly. "Given her up for me?" "No. I saw how you looked at her. You would have chosen her." "So it was jealousy?" Tayo asked. "Not just revenge for the money?" Vivica paused, then nodded. "Maybe. Lamont was all I had left after my husband died. I lived for him, and she was taking him away from me." "Tell me what happened on the wedding day," Tayo asked. "I planned to talk to her, to try once more to convince her to back down. I took printouts from her blog with me as evidence. We went to the bride's room," Vivica said in an even voice, as if recounting the plot of a movie. "When I showed her the papers, she denied everything at first. Then she admitted it. She said the company deserved it, that they were harassing people for profit." "And you hit her," Tayo said. "I was furious. She stood there in her white dress, so righteous, so sure she was right." Vivica clenched her hands. "I grabbed the first thing I could find, this crystal vase. I hit her on the head, just once." Lamont made a strangled sound, as if he couldn't breathe. "Oh my God, Mom! What have you done? I was protecting you." Vivica looked at him imploringly. "She was a fraud, a criminal. She lied to you about her past. She would have ruined your career, your reputation, when the truth came out." "Don't you dare!" Lamont raised his voice. Don't you dare say you did it for me. You killed the woman I loved. You ruined my life. Tayo stepped forward, taking out his handcuffs. Viveka Rivera, you are under arrest for the murder of Anisha Quaid. You have the right to remain silent. Wait, Viveka interrupted him. Let me say something else, please. Tayo looked at Lamont, who was standing with his back to the window, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Go ahead, he said. Lamont. Viveka's voice softened. Son, I never wanted to hurt you. Everything I did in my life was for you. When your father died, I vowed to give you the best future, the best education, the best life. I worked myself to exhaustion, saving every dollar. My father. Lamont turned, his face wet with tears. Did he really die in an accident? Or was that a lie too? Viveka paled. What do you mean? The truth, Mom. At least now, tell me the truth. Tayo watched them both closely, sensing that there was another secret here. Your father, Viveka faltered. It wasn't exactly an accident. We had a big fight that day. About money, about his refusal to take a promotion. He ran out of the house in a rage, got into his car drunk. He crashed on the bridge. And you blamed yourself all this time, Lamont said quietly. That's why you became so controlling, so obsessed with money and success. I didn't want to lose you the way I lost him, Viveka whispered. I couldn't make another mistake. And yet you made one, Lamont shook his head. The worst one. Tayo decided it was time to end this. Viveka Rivera, turn around and put your hands behind your back. She obeyed without resistance, still looking at her son. Forgive me, Lamont, if you can. Tayo snapped the handcuffs on her wrists and read her the rest of her rights. Viveka listened silently, her head bowed. I'll call a patrol car, Tayo said to Lamont. Want to ride into town? Lamont shook his head. I'll go with her. I have to. He didn't finish the sentence, but Tayo understood. Despite everything Viveka had done, she was still his mother, and he needed to have this conversation, as painful as it was. When the patrol car arrived, Tayo handed Viveka over to the officers and watched as they put her in the back seat. Lamont sat next to her, not looking at her. I'll contact the prosecutor, Tayo said, addressing both of them. Given the circumstances and your full confession, it may be possible to avoid the maximum sentence. Viveka nodded weakly. Thank you, Detective. Take care of my son while I'm gone. I can take care of myself, Lamont said quietly. I always have. The car pulled away, carrying mother and son away, one to an inevitable prison sentence, the other to a life full of painful memories and slow healing. Tayo remained standing by the small house, staring at the calm surface of the lake. The case was solved, the killer confessed. But the real tragedy was not the crime itself, but its consequences. Lives destroyed, relationships torn apart, hearts broken. He took out his phone and called Zara. It's over, he said. Viveka has confessed. How's Lamont? Zara asked. He's holding up, but he'll need support in the coming months. Can you take care of him? Of course, she replied quietly. Anishka would have wanted that. Tayo ended the call and slowly walked to his car. The sky above the lake was darkening, heralding a storm. Thunder rumbled somewhere in the distance. He really wanted a cigarette. A red lucky strike, Tayo thought as he started the engine. And maybe a whiskey.